Hi everyone and welcome to the Happy Podcast, Healthcare and Pharmaceutical Insights. Series 2 is all about a day in the life of. I'm looking forward to spending time with a variety of different people in the healthcare and pharmaceutical industry, discussing what it is that they do on a daily basis. So sit back, relax and enjoy. Hi everyone and welcome back to another edition of the Happy Podcast, Healthcare and Pharmaceutical Insights podcast. And again, I'm delighted to have another special guest with me. This is a lady who I have known for a long time. I've learned a huge amount from a distance. We've worked on a number of different projects over the years, mainly with regards to recruitment. But I was delighted when she accepted my invite to come on today and continue in our series in the day and the life of. And I'm going to allow her to give an introduction. Now, I know this lady as Chris McCourt, but on her LinkedIn, she's Christina McCourt. So I don't know, are we going to go with your Sunday name? Are we going to go with Chris? I'll leave that entirely up to you. We'll go with Chris, I think.
Fine. It's so funny. I've been on teams where I've been one of 5 Chris's. So sometimes they call me Christina just for differentiation.
Yes, well, we'll go with Chris because I've never called you by your full name. So great to see you. Thanks for coming on, Chris. And we'll talk a bit about why you're coming on to this Day in the Life series, about what you've been doing more recently. But I think it's good for people to come on, and everyone's got a story, as I said a while ago, and your career history. I know a little bit about you, but for people watching and listening, you want to give us a little bit of a potted history to your career and what you've been doing?
Oh, thanks, Colin. First of all, it's really great to be part of this series. I really enjoyed listening to the others as well. So, hi everyone, I'm Chris, and I was born and brought up in Ayrshire on the west coast of Scotland. And after uni in Glasgow, really thought my life was destined to be in retail, and went to John Lewis to the partnership where I started off as a commercial trainee. And I guess alongside that, I also met, and I guess you could say fell in love with my now husband. And he was in Glasgow as a pharmacist. So we found ourselves on the 2 cities in Scotland and trying to figure out who was going to give up either Edinburgh or Glasgow. And he said to me, in 1988, you'd be great as a sales rep in the pharmaceutical industry. And I didn't even know that was a job. So anyway, a couple of weeks later, 4 offers came in after going through an assessment centre in Edinburgh, and I decided to pick Allen and Hanbury's because of the respiratory angle. Now, for those of you who may not know that far back, that went on to become Glaxo, and then further on to that, GlaxoSmithKline. So that started me with 13 years, 2 children, and then a big merger. So I pretty much did medical sales reps job. I did a hospital sales job, and latterly got a real interest in market access and started to work on some of the business development where we could work with the health boards in Scotland to try and make sure that patients got the right access to our treatment. And then we had the merger, and really, to be honest, at that point, I was kind of at a crossroads about what do I do. There wasn't a natural job for me, or if it was, it wasn't in the right geography. And as the mum of 2 young kids, we started to make different decisions. And there was one person who shall remain nameless, but if you want to ask me ever, who actually took me aside and probably gave me the most honest feedback, which was, for me, it was likely time to leave, which after 13 years was really scary. Because I was very familiar with my surroundings. So anyway, I took the advice and then moved to AstraZeneca. And that was also competitively quite challenging too, because they were a massive competitor, particularly in respiratory. Anyway, the long and short was I took a regional business development exec's job there and got amazing, and I mean amazing, mentoring and support from people who I know are well connected to these podcasts and also on LinkedIn. And without their support and encouragement, I doubt I'd even be on this podcast today. So within a year, was thrown into the deep end because an opportunity came to manage the team that I'd been part of. And then between that and right up until 2012, I rose through the ranks to be a national sales manager of Scotland and Northern Ireland, and did a whole host of big mega launches, as we called them then. And then in 2012, took a different turn, again because of mentoring, and became the head of marketing for our major respiratory brand. So moved down to St Albans and worked there through the week and came home at weekends. And then after that, went straight back into another big organisational change that took me to 2017 at AstraZeneca. Loved every single bit of it. But then as my girls were growing up and we were making some decisions for our family, I decided I had one big change left in me, which we'll go into later. So in 2017, I decided, and after several interviews and meeting lots of different people, launched myself into the global world of pharmaceuticals.
Which is what we're going to have a good discussion about in a minute. And life is obviously changing for you just now, which if people are keen to have a discussion with you about it, most people, that, as we talked about earlier on, who are watching this, a lot of people anyway will know you and know that things are changing for you in the next few months. But I've known you certainly from a leadership perspective over the years, and mainly when I've been obviously involved in recruiting. You've been kind enough and loyal enough, which makes a big difference to us, and certainly to me, in terms of coming to me looking either for people or for a little bit of advice over the years as well. So it's clear that anyone I know who's had any interactions with you or worked for you, you've been an inspirational person to them. You've helped them. You've mentored. You talked about mentored. People have mentored you in your life, and I think that's really important. And I know for you, as you move on to this next chapter, that's not necessarily something you want to stop. You want to keep that going, that offering that advice because you love it and you enjoy it, and something that I think I can see you continuing doing in a different way moving forward. So you moved into obviously moving up the ranks within our industry, in the pharma industry, into this role within global. And this is a part I wanted to talk to you about because obviously we look at a lot of job titles now and we see people who are doing different roles, and there's some of the more, if you want to call it, traditional roles that still exist within pharma, from representative, regional business manager, all valuable roles. But more recently, this kind of global title has come in to a lot of roles. And that's what you moved into. And I think a lot of people maybe look at it from afar and go, what does global actually mean? First and foremost. So do you want to give us just a bit of an idea of what your most recent role has been, and give us a kind of day in the life of the global role that you've been doing?
Well, for sure. So the global world is completely different. I think before I left, like the UK marketing company for AstraZeneca, I thought I was pretty well equipped to handle anything. And actually, I felt like I was joining a new company going into global because, first of all, nothing worked. My laptop didn't work. My company card didn't work. Nothing worked because everything had to be handed back and restarted. And I found that really challenging. That was the first thing. I think second to that was I took this job on as a passion project. Well, there's two jobs I've done, but the one most recently I would call my passion project, something I really wanted to do more of and get more stuck into. And project management was the sort of goal there. And what I realized very quickly was I'm really used to managing and leading people while I was just solo in this job, right? So I had to use all the sort of skills I had to build networks, get stakeholders on board, but at the same time deliver and be accountable for the projects. So I went into the world of market access, and to get a single source of how does market access actually work. And with that, I had to, because there was no blueprint. The whole point of my job was to build a sustainable single source to help all the countries. Now, we focused a lot on our key markets, but I also find myself going to places like Taipei and Taiwan and Hong Kong and all over the globe, working with colleagues to build that market access plan. So when it comes to a day in the life, the first thing you need to do is be super organized. Now, the way global worked, which was quite new to me, was that you have to manage your diary, your own diary, the diary of your stakeholders, and the diary of your vendors. So for those of you who've never worked with vendors, that's the people who come in to help support you with some of the more technical builds of whatever programs you're building. And those are the first three things that you put into your calendar straight away. And then you build the rest of your calendar around those regulars, because if you're building something new, you have to have your core team that help you, and they could come from anywhere across the business. But subject matter experts are critical at this point. So they would be weekly, And then maybe 2 to 4 weekly, we would have stakeholders, the people who were actually sponsoring the project, keeping them involved so that at every opportunity they got a chance to market it and sell it into them to the countries. And then, of course, you had to manage the vendors too. So those catch-ups really were the backbone of what we had to do. And then obviously I had regular one-to-ones with my own line manager, had to anticipate changes in the marketplace, anticipate the fact that what happens in the UK might not happen in the US, certainly won't happen in China. So you had to start thinking about that, the cultural changes, the license changes, and then suddenly you realize you're building something that there isn't a one size fits all. So our best was to build something that would maybe be 70% accurate, and then we'd focus the time with the markets on how do we polish it to make it the right fit for them at the right time. So the only other thing I'd add to that was that global for me, I think if you've not worked there and you've only seen it from the markets or the countryside, you've got to work together so that whatever you build, the marketing companies are really involved as well. It's essential to build the relationships. I was an enabler, not an inspector, and I think it's a tight line to walk on, because you have to do a bit of both. You have to obviously make sure that you are a valued and respected member, but at the same time, you still need to get to whatever it is that you're trying to affect change on. Without their involvement, you really would struggle, I think, to do something that leaves a legacy.
So would you say, knowing you well enough, knowing you relatively well, one of the biggest transitions from what you did previously was a leadership role where people were, feeding into you effectively. That then, must have been quite a big change for you in terms of going to that completely autonomous role where it's you and then you're feeding into people. So if that makes sense, where you're trying to identify who the best people are internally, certainly within AZ, the size of business that they are, then going externally. That must have been quite a big transition.
Do you know, I honestly, and some of my team members who worked with me before, I actually want to apologise to them. I'll tell you why. Because I had expectations in the UKMC that when we were asked to do something, myself and my team would deliver. When you're asked to do something in global, and you look behind you, there is no team, you're it. And I started to feel how I guess some of my managers and account managers may have felt in the past years when I'd made the same request of them. So I had to dig deep, and one of the things I really built a new skill on, which I recommend, and it still involves a lot of leadership, but it's without authority. So how can you be a credible partner where you have no authority, but you're working with teams so that they see the value in you working with them? And actually that really was the turning point for me. And it probably took about 6 or 8 months for me to get into a place where I could freely pick up the phone, have a proper discussion where both sides would be respected. And I wasn't feeling at any point that I was just like leaving a message. I was actually doing something more than that. So that was really tough, but it also allowed me to realize the kind of leader I was, or maybe wasn't. So the other passion, as we've talked on, was leadership. And I think managing people or leading people is a complete privilege. So at AstraZeneca, we have a mentoring program. So what happens there is that you can sign up to be a mentor or a mentoree. And then you put your profile up and then people can come to you. And I have really valued that because I probably have about 6 or 8 people on the go at any one time. And I learned so much from them, but hopefully I can also share some of the things I did. So I've still got my fix, even although I didn't have my own team.
Your own team as such. And on a kind of simple level as such, so global, did you do a huge amount of traveling all the time, or did you find... Obviously, the world has changed quite considerably over the last few years, and but were you doing? I mean, I know you from traveling up and down south quite a lot to Cambridge or to Luton, but from a global perspective, were you finding that you were jumping on planes and doing more international work?
The first job definitely was. The first job was clinical, and we were building a clinical curriculum for respiratory, and then we were coaching first line sales leaders. And myself and a colleague went on a bit of a roadshow where we went literally around the globe and we interacted with most of Europe, China, America, and Japan, and then Taiwan on the way back. So we actually had the privilege of working with over 2,500 first-line sales leaders. So that took place over a sort of 10-month period. And then in between times, you're gaining the feedback and you're building, you're working with translation companies as well. Actually, when you're doing the coaching, you've got this instantaneous translation happening. So again, new skills, new cultures you had to learn.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That job, definitely. This job on the market access capability, had it not been for COVID, would likely have followed the same pattern. So we've had to adapt to bring our learning online. So again, another opportunity to learn how to do it slightly differently. But now the world's opening up. There's no doubt that these roadshows will start to happen again. They're very effective. They're very effective. And the unintended bonus, I guess, is you get to see the world, and your horizons just are so much wider.
Yeah. And were your expectations, obviously, when you moved into that role, and in any role, when anybody moves any job, they've got, their ideas and their expectations of what it's going to look like, which can be harder when you're moving externally. It's from one company to another, but obviously you were moving internally within the business. Were your expectations of how that role looked, were they met? Some of them met, none of them met. Was how did that fall out?
Some of them met. I think that the idea for me, what I discovered was a steep learning curve. So the first thing is that we're focusing on 3 home offices, one in the US, one in the UK, one in China. So you've got to deal with time zones. Never had to do that before. So sometimes you're up early, sometimes you're going to bed late.
Yeah.
So that was, although I knew on paper that's what the job was, the reality of that was quite different. And I had to set alarms at the wrong times of the day and then make sure the house was quiet, or wherever I was, whichever room was quiet. So that was one thing. I think trying not to reinvent or criticize, going back to the enabling piece, was another thing that actually became actually, really kind of like an unexpected surprise for me, was about how much I was learning as well. It's difficult to gain traction in the global world because everybody runs to 25-minute schedules. So
right, okay.
And literally the calls stop.
Yeah, and I remember you saying that to me, actually. Yeah. You're
like, no, I need to go, and they're off. And you have to learn that muscle of, you've got 25 minutes to get your point across. And as a communicator or a chatter, depending how you want to describe me, I had to really learn to just stick to the facts. But I always felt sometimes that maybe I wasn't building the relationships because I was just sticking to the facts. But over time, I needn't have worried. And the networks and the stakeholders came, because I think the other thing was that I delivered. And that's been something throughout my career, is I don't tend to sign up for something I'm not prepared to deliver or wouldn't do myself. And I think the only other thing was that everybody seemed to know what they were doing. And I felt quite like kind of out of water. I felt like a real newbie. And after 25 plus years in industry, that was very uncomfortable for me. And then I realized that although there's no grace period, you're supposed to hit the ground running. Actually, a lot of people were just putting on a really brave face, whereas mine was probably more honest. And then I think that's why the mentoring really became a part, because many people came to me and said, gosh, you're just so honest about this. And that's okay.
Yeah. I would say that you are very honest, and any interactions that I've had with you is very, I know where I am, and people know where they are, know what's going on. And I think that going back to that 25-minute thing you're talking about, I think us not everybody, us Scottish people might find that quite difficult, because we like a chat, we like to get to know people. We have a really good, I think, overall reputation of being, warm and welcoming and stuff like that. So that must be quite, not that I'm sure it's not always like that, and it's all cold kind of business the whole time, but I think there has to be a bit of space sometimes to get to know people, within a people business.
I think the adaptability is the other thing I'd say, is that I learned probably through my mistakes about, and it was more cultural as well, that some countries just operate differently.
Yeah.
Some meetings happen standing up, right? And then everyone just goes home. So it just was that rich kind of like feeling of learning. You know, I think I went from being a relatively medium-sized fish in a pond to being a minnow in an ocean, pretty much. And then slowly it all started to fit into place.
Yeah.
And I loved it because I had to figure it out. And problem solving is one of the things I really enjoy doing as well.
Yeah, yeah. Good. So a good period of learning. And as I said, you go into any new job or any new project or any new opportunity with a degree of, you know, what you think it's going to look like, and that can get turned upside down very, very quickly as well. But I think it's, if you go into something and you continue to learn and you continue to develop new ideas and learn from it, other people, as you go into that new role, that's good. What would you say? So you had your kind of ideas and of what it would look like. What would you say were the biggest challenges that you identified and that you started to see in the global role?
So I think in addition to what I've said, the fact that we, and I was very UK centric, and I think that if you're going into global, just don't do what I did. Like stop saying about the UK MC all the time. Talk about other countries or your experiences rather than just the one trick pony. Because I think that people get fed up with that being rammed down their throats, frankly, because not everybody operates that way. I went into markets where they hadn't launched some of our medicines yet. In the UK, we were in patent expiry. So you were like, oh, wow, they've got a brand new opportunity. And I think that one of the biggest learns for me was, if I take one of our biggest respiratory brands as an example, taking everything that we learned from being, you know, like a blockbuster and taking it to a smaller country that hadn't even launched it. You were allowed to accelerate and support them accelerate their performance. And that gave me a huge amount of pride. But I guess I just haven't thought about it. And it's as naive as that. I hadn't thought about it. I thought because we were doing it all, everybody was. And then I think other healthcare systems would be the other big learn I had. You know, we love the NHS, right? We talk about it so fondly. And even at the moment when it's under challenge, most of us would defend it. And rightly so, because when you go into some of the other markets where it's just insurance-based, if you don't have a job, you're not entitled to healthcare. Or if you're not in a city of a massive country, you're kind of left to, I'm not even going to just say medicine, sometimes it's just homeopathic remedies. And you have to really adjust your thinking about how would you work with people who've got so many different ways of healthcare. And then you go into other markets where it's a bit of co-pay. So the patient pays for some and maybe the government pays for some, and maybe if you're fortunate enough, whoever you're working with, the organization pays for some. Really taught me, and I would love this to be one of the messages, is that we're very spoilt because we expect it all at entry. That's very unusual. So that was another piece that I really learned when I was probably not expecting it. That, you know, healthcare varies from country to country. And therefore you have to adapt.
I had a discussion with this, a very similar discussion, with a client on Friday. You know, we're just having a very open, you know, conversation about the challenges that are going on in the NHS in the UK just now, which is front and centre of everybody's, you know, media platform at the moment. And this individual is in a global role as well. And I asked the question, where is it working? What countries is the NHS or the equivalent of the NHS really working? And I suppose that I think that the kind of answer to that is, well, it's not really perfect anywhere. You know, it's slightly aspects of it are better in you know, perhaps France than it is here, but they've got other challenges in you know, Germany and blah blah blah. So it's not perfect anywhere. And everybody knows, certainly in the UK, it's under a huge amount of pressure and stress, and that's a whole different discussion. People get their own opinions in terms of how that should look and how that should work. But I would imagine that would have been, you know, one of the challenges that you had to, you know, try and pick up on, because you're going from learning the difference between Scottish and English in Wales and Northern Ireland to going from UK to international. And learning all that must have been one of, you know,
you
one
need
of the
to do your
challenges.
homework, and I think that's the other thing. So I actually and I guess if any global colleagues are listening, they'll know this, I actually built a handbook about the joining
Good. That's a great idea. Yeah.
And I recorded my journeys about the things that I didn't get on day 1, the things I didn't know on day 30, what happened at day 90 when the whole thing went wrong, how the systems worked. And I know for the new starters now, even although there's nothing specific on branding there, it's just like you're writing a letter to yourself about, if you read this document, everything you need to know is kind of contained within here. And I think that that's where you have a fast start, because you have to do your homework. Because that was the other thing. You would not go onto a call with Germany and not know their underworld, because the last thing they wanted to do was tell me, typical question, what keeps you up at night? They're not interested. They expect you to come with a level of knowledge, and then for you to then help shape their thinking on their challenge or their opportunity, not necessarily bring what my history would have told me. So that again was humbling, but again blew your mind, because then you just thought, gosh, if I'd known this, I might have been doing something different 10 years ago in the UK. Right?
Yeah, but, so you're constantly learning. You're looking out with the working day, so to speak, and seeing, right, what's going on in other countries. Within AZ, what's happening there? What are they doing? Can we learn from that? Can we bring that into the UK? Can they learn from me as well? So to kind of wrap this up, people watching this just now are maybe considering going into a global role, within market access, within marketing, or whatever. What advice would you give to somebody watching this just now who's considering moving into that type of position?
First of all, I'd say do it. Just do it. Because although it will be a steep learning curve, I thought I knew a lot about our industry. But moving into this job just taught me about how much I didn't know. But my energy and passion for learning was actually and I'm not saying I was marking time, because that would be wrong too, but I think it just opened up a whole sea of new opportunities for me. I think the mentoring that you get as well is, again, really broad as opposed to quite intense. So you get opportunities to really meet an amazing bunch of people. You're also exposed to senior leaders. And when I say senior leaders, I'm talking up at Pascal's level and to his set. Now, that would be a rarity in a market, but in a global team, you're accountable for them, to them. So that was also great. I think we also have the opportunity to shape and grow the business from a higher level. And I always thought with market access, if you can get the formulary right, or the guidance right, or the protocol right, then you can implement it, the rest would follow. Well, the global business is not really that different. So the further up the chain you can actually get the strategy right for whatever it is that you're doing that will make a difference in most of the markets, the more successful you're going to be. I think that on the 2 projects that I've been working on, that I've done 2 jobs in the 5 years, I think I've learned so much, and I think travel broadens the mind anyway. I know it's a cliche, but it does, and I think going to it just changes your perspective. And 2 of our projects won Chief Exec Officer awards, which really superseded anything. And I love my teams that are watching it. We won lots of awards in the UK, but to then take it to the global level, you're just pinching yourself saying, I can't actually believe I'm sitting in this chair and that's just happened. So I think believe in yourself, because I didn't know what I was letting myself in for, but there are so many people there willing to help you. So I just think believe that you can, and just go do it, right? Figure it out. And like I say, if anyone does want to know more information, then I'm really happy to jump on it.
Oh, that's good. And I think to offer that is great. And I mean, as I said, I've said a few times on this call, I've known you for a while, and I've known that you're very much let's just do it. Let's just go for it. And as I've seen you do different roles, particularly within AZ, you've taken them on, and you've gone, right, let's go for it. There'll be challenges, of course, there'll be frustrations, but it's a learning opportunity, which you can take on now in terms of what you decide to do in the next few weeks and months. You can take it on and help other people, either locally or potentially globally. As well. So all of that is hugely useful. So this has been really helpful in terms of being able to share. I hope you've enjoyed it, Chris, in terms of being just taking half an hour of your time just to talk a little bit more about what you've done and the challenges and the opportunities behind it. And it's been great. It's been good to listen and to learn from you today. So thank you so much. I do appreciate your time. I wish you every luck. I know you and I will continue talking over the next few weeks and months, but I do wish you every success. Thank you for coming on today, and we'll talk soon.
Great. Thanks, Colin. It's been a real pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you. Cheers.